Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's another dad chat with me and Nate. Nate, I apologize, I'm coming down off of a cold, so if you have to edit out some coughing in the background, that's gonna be happening. But you have a kid now, so you're gonna know all about being sick constantly soon enough. But how are you doing?
I'm good, man. It's a wet, cold, kind of trashy day here in beautiful London, England. But so we're kind of, I hope, nearly done with the big displacement. We're in kind of the most annoying phase of the repair in the sense that the sewer pipe itself, the reason for all this has been fixed, but they have to put our house back together. So at present, they had to cement, repair the foundation where they cut away a chunk of it to dig a shaft. They thankfully they backfilled it the end of last week. And then they have to retile the floor. And then once they're done with that, they can start moving all of the stuff, rebuild the interior wall, put the toilet and the shower and the cabinets and all that shit back together, the washing machine, everything back where it was. And then the kitchen will be accessible. Because right now it's like a, imagine trying to do kitchen tasks inside a storage unit, like where people are taking advantage of getting the smallest storage unit at a cheap price and packing that motherfucker full. That's what it's like, right? Like I can get in and use my coffee maker because hilariously that's, available. But like, I don't have any utensils because I have one fork that I had hand washed that's out. And if I need a non-fork, I have to just get some disposable ones.
You got to get a spork. Don't they have those in England?
I have a military mess kit and I know where it is, but I bought it in Korea at a vintage, like a surplus store. And we have this, it's very funny. There's a kitchen island, but it's not like a permanent installation. It's just like a big cabinet thing, like an island. But you can tell that it must be very old. And over the years, like the problem of if you don't have like protective something a barrier between the wood and a tile floor, moisture starts to kind of condense around that contact point and it rots the wood and eventually has to be cut down. So that's what's happened. So they've cut it down. So it's like a kitchen counter, but it's just too short for me. Like me, I'm not a hugely tall guy. I'm 6 foot even. But imagine having your kitchen counters and then someone comes in and like North Korean Panmunjom chairs them 4 inches down and you're trying to like use a cutting board on that. So unfortunately, I don't really use it. It winds up becoming more of sort of like a storage space, like putting stuff down while you're cooking, etc. And it has cabinet doors on either side. And I know exactly where my mess kit is. The problem is the bathroom door and the shower door are blocking one side and the other side is literally pressed up against the oven with all that bullshit and everything. So I can't get to it. I just can't. I know where the thing I need is, exactly where it is. And like, I just, like you said, sometimes you just can't do it. You zen, woo-saw, and you go out and you buy a fucking spork at the corner shop.
So Nate, last time we talked, we were discussing reading to your kid, and I was curious because I, as an American, I know the books that we have here, and I assume that in England you have the usual like Dr. Seuss, Hungry Caterpillar, things like that for like the very small babies. But like, what do you have like available? Do you have golden books there? Like, what are you reading to your kid at this point?
I got to be real with you, man. I read what Cynthia recommends. She picks out books. Obviously, Winnie the Pooh and Paddington Bear stuff is very popular here for kids because Peter Rabbit also, because these are things that were are sort of established small children's things that are British.
Yeah.
Well, we are in Britain, so it does kind of make sense that they would. Whereas like the Very Hungry Caterpillar is American, but American by way of German, by way of guy who was like drafted into the Wehrmacht and had a really horrible time. I don't know if you know that story, but the guy who, I can't remember his name, but the guy who did the Very Hungry Caterpillar I think he was drafted as like a teenager to fight in the very end of World War II and then emigrated to America. He became a children's author kind of as sort of like I remember reading an interview with him where he said that he wanted to give kids the kind of childhood he didn't have. And he kind of sublimated all of the things that he had experienced through this, because that's all he did was he was a children's author and illustrator. So dark turn there, but that book, I don't know if it's as popular here as it is in America because it's fundamentally an American book. But like you've got your sort of canonical stuff, and also just like there's so much more stuff available because there's just so much more children's publishing.
There
now.
Really is. My wife and I go to a secondhand store called Savers, which is like, for you Americans, it's like Goodwill, but if Goodwill was like clean and well organized and whatnot.
Sure.
And I always breeze through the kids section. One, because we're always looking for books for Lily because she's constantly reading. Like we can never have enough books for her. But also, I like to find books that I can turn into buttons. So I actually found 2 Tintin books like that were in French there. And one of them was like Tintin in Africa. I was like, well, let me go ahead and take that and make sure that nobody else can get that.
There's a book called Tintin in the Congo, or Tintin au Congo in French, and it's very bad. It's Some of the Tintin stuff. Tintin is actually, I don't know if you know this, but he's actually, the creator is Belgian. But and Belgians, you're like, not as bad as the French. No, worse.
No.
So it's interesting though. Cynthia does, like I said, she picks books and we read them together. She got a book about like books about famous people that are done for kids, just like in a fun way. One of the books was actually a book about David Bowie, but like a sort of like small child's biography, picture book about David Bowie. It's really cool.
Yeah, we have that one. Yeah,
it's fun. It doesn't talk about the Thin White Duke and the Nazi salute and subsisting on cocaine, red peppers, and milk for a year and weighing 80 pounds and making an amazing album he has no recollection of making. The 1976 album Station to Station, he says, is the album he said is the album he remembered the least.
Stephen King's got a couple books like that. Most of his early ones, like Pet Cemeteries. Like, I don't remember writing that, but it's good. So fuck
I'll
it.
be real with you. Station to Station is one of my favorite Bowie albums. So you know what? Anyway,
cocaine's a hell of a drug, man.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug. So Cynthia recently got some bilingual children's books, and the idea was that we could read them to her, that she would read the English, is literally line for line, but just like, it's not like literal translation so much as, it's the same story, the same everything, but it's done so it rhymes and has the kind of like turns of phrase and such in French. Like we're not planning on look, I don't know what's going to happen, in the sense that we may determine based on how well she handles when she gets to the talking age, when she's in nursery in Geneva, that it may make sense for me to speak to her in French. Now, I'm not a native French speaker, but I do speak it well enough that, I can do baby talk, among other things. I can do all like there's things when I realize the gaps in my French knowledge, just because I haven't had to speak it on a daily basis in almost 20 years. But I am confident that I can do that, and I'm going to be speaking it every day when we're there anyway. So we might do that, but we just thought it might be something nice where, she gets used to hearing. Sometimes I speak to her in French just to joke around, but French
is a nice language though. Like it's not like German. German is a very harsh sounding language, but French really kind of rolls off the tongue a little bit nicer.
Yeah, but it's it is funny. French. Something that I find very funny about it is that the real heads know this, that the French, and this is specifically France, but like France is, it's not the biggest population, Francophone population in the world. That honor is the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the biggest Francophone city in the world is Kinshasa in the DRC. However, obviously France is like the imperial core, the cultural center, the metropole, and all of the institutions around the regulation of the French language are there. And so in France, you have literally like a sort of, I don't know it super well to be able to explain all of it, but there's basically, if you spend a career in arts and letters and writing, editing, it's publishing, journalism, a very high honor is to be elected to what's called the Académie Française, or the French Academy. And basically like they are kind of the advisory governing body about like the rules of the French language and such. And so they actually will do things where they put out sort of new words, terms, etc., to have an official French use word for French language, like official documents, that isn't a loan word, because they fucking love borrowing words from English. Not as much as the Germans do, but they like, I can't even remember what you would call a parking lot. They'd be, like genuinely like something de stationnement, because like they just say un parking, like a parking. faire du babysitting is the example we always learned in French class. Like, you there? Yeah, sorry.
I know very little about any other language. But though Lily has been kind of like, we have we bought Duolingo, like the one where you can, the yearly subscription or whatever.
Yeah.
And she, for a big chunk of time, she really loved learning German. She's like, German's very easy to her. So, which I don't understand, but also, she's 8 and her brain works far different than mine does. But I did, so recently, cause I read to her every day, when she was a baby. And as soon as she started learning how to read by herself, which was like by 5 years old, she was reading on her own, which is very, very early, but she loves to read. So
Yeah.
she taught herself. And, but now she's kind of, she said something about it to my wife, and, Beth was like, well, Dad used to read to you all the time. And, we understand you're older now. You want to read your own books. But, he's always a little sad that he doesn't, read to you anymore. So she actually was just like, well, you can, read to me before bed. And we started reading Redwall, which I was worried that she was a little too young for, because she's also kind of a sensitive kid. She doesn't like a lot of violence, and she doesn't like a lot of
I literally like went to bed crying because I was so sad when I read the story that Julius Caesar got stabbed when I was 7. So absolutely, like, I was a sensitive child, and I read Redwall at the same age. I was 8 when I first read it, and I fucking loved it. I absolutely was entranced by it.
Yeah.
So I think
and she is as well. She loves the hairs. She loves how she loves my over the top British accent for the hairs. Which is very, because it's a British book, but like all the mice have, I guess, American accents, and it's only the hairs.
Well, no, I think that the mice are supposed to have sort of like your neutral Southern English accent, and then but then like the hairs have the really kind of like Ponzi fancy officer voice, like, oh, hello, good sir, that kind of talk, and then the moles are supposed to be Welsh,
Okay,
so they sound a bit confused.
Oh, I thought the moles were Australian.
No, I don't think Australia factors into the Redwall universe. Can you imagine if you had Australian flora and fauna in the Redwall universe? It's like, oh
like
no,
a kangaroo comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. It's like all the the badger, the salamandastron doesn't exist because the badgers just are an invasive species there and just killed all of the native birds or something. And it's like they have to deal with like the evil Joanna rabbits run fucking rampant in Australia because the Brits brought them there as to be like hunting. Like they want to it'd be exciting. I think if I remember correctly, they wanted to bring rabbits. So they could bring foxes. So the foxes would eat the rabbits so they could hunt foxes like they do in England. And this led to a situation where rabbits are a horrible, huge pest in Australia. But back to Redwall books.
She's learning all kinds of British flora and fauna. She's like, "What's a stoat?" I'm like,
"What's a stoat?" Yeah,
it's like a ferret. Well, What's a ferret? Like there's a bunch ferret, stoats, and weasels. They're all like, take a mouse and stretch it, and you basically got it.
And make it hella aggressive.
Yeah,
hella aggressive.
I do like one thing that that concerns me with Redwall, not too much, but like the fact that like if you are born a certain species, you are bad or good.
Yeah, if you're a rat, you're just evil.
Yeah, there's no good rats, there's no good stoats. There's also no females either. Like I don't know where all of these like Clooney's rat horde of 500, 700 rats. Like where are all the lady rats that are birthing these rats?
But also the first Redwall, and this gives you some kind of like literally the book Redwall gives you a perspective on how annoying I must have been as a child, has some world building details that never get revisited.
Yeah,
there are humans in the first Redwall.
Yes,
they're only vaguely alluded to, but no, Clooney and his rats caused a stampede of cattle that destroyed a town.
Yes.
Now it's never specified what town it is, but if there are cows, then like it can't be a mouse town because, of course, a single cow could destroy a mouse town. It's got to be people. And
we got to the part where we're coming up on the part where Matthias is going to meet Captain Snow, the snowy owl, and he's in a barn that has bales of hay and farming implements that like And also the other thing that's weird is that the Sparrow Warriors that are up in the up at the top, like they're like, yeah, nobody goes up there. Like, well, who built the roof then? Like, somebody had to build all of this stuff and then just be like, yeah, we just don't go up there anymore. Like, nobody's ever been up there. Like, somebody's got to repair the masonry up there, I think.
I would
but
say
also,
that,
like, I feel like we're doing that thing where we're reading too far into a book that's written for 12-year-olds.
But also that, like, it was the first in the series, and so he kind of had established this world. And then I think as time went on, he realized that in the same way that if you remember Calvin and Hobbes, Uncle Max only appears once because Bill Watterson said it's very awkward that Max can never call his brother or his sister-in-law by their first names. Yeah. Because then if he does, then you know Calvin's parents' names and they can only be mom and dad. Yeah. Similarly, I think that, like, my impression is Brian Jacques was looking to, his initial conception of it was something kind of like Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. Mm-hmm. And then it wound up being inconvenient to the way the story worked and what people connected with, and the fact that, like, well, if you have the anthropomorphic animals, then why do there need to be humans?
Right.
Like, there can just be animals in this world. And so
yeah,
everyone
if you want anthropomorphic animals with humans, there's always Watership Down, and there's always what's the
the Secret of Nim? A fucking American Tale. Learn all about the Pale of Settlement pogroms in the early 20th century by watching this heartfelt story about Fievel and his family.
I fucking love that movie, though. I think she would like that one too.
Yeah, well, Cynthia,
teach her about Jewish heritage.
I was going to say, I mean, Fievel. It's just I wonder if Fievel Mouskowitz is supposed to be Jewish. Similarly, Cynthia loved that as a kid, so she's excited to have our daughter watch and hopefully sing along to "There Are No Cats in America." Yeah, among other songs.
So apparently, there's an animated series of Redwall too, where they cover Redwall, they cover Matameo, and they cover Martin the Warrior, and fucking they had Slagar the Cruel is voiced by Tim Curry.
Huh. Yeah. That's interesting.
And I had to go look it up. And yeah, Tim Curry has the perfect voice for a bad guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great. Slagar the Cruel is... So I'm hoping that we get to... I didn't really like the Matameo book itself, but
Matameo was interesting because it introduced the idea of like a heroine, like and that there was kind of a romantic relationship between them. And if I remember, or there was sort of the beginnings of one, if I remember it correctly. And I'm operating on really old memories here, but like I don't think that really happens as much ever again. Like there isn't really any kind of like call it nascent romances with the characters. Interesting though, because
there. I mean,
is there? I don't really remember.
So in Martin the Warrior, Martin falls in love, but spoiler alert. At the end of Martin the Warrior, his romantic partner dies, and then that feeds into the Mossflower book, where he's found by the Sarmenia, the Russian, I assume, cats. Because they all start with Sar, and he's got a broken sword and everything. So he's got to go to the Badger Lords and get a new sword forged.
Get a new sword made. So. Yeah. It's like Animal Legend of Zelda. I mean, the Redwall universe is kind of Animal Hyrule, except way more feasts. But I would say, yeah, I'm thinking about it now. So I remember reading. So I think I read Mossflower first. Or I tried to read Mossflower. I would have been about 8, kind of like going on 9. And I think it was Matameo that actually kind of connected well with me. I pronounced it Matimeo because I had no idea how you were supposed to say any of the names. Because like we lived in Germany.
Yeah. Also, how do you pronounce the Badger Mountain?
I guess it's Salamandastron or Salamandastron. I always
called it Salamandastron.
I thought it was Salamandastron too, but I've heard people say Salamandastron, and so like, I genuinely don't know. And like Brian Jacques did lots of readings before he died, so I'm sure it's possible to get like an official guide to how to pronounce the names, which would have been useful because we named our cats. Me and my brother named our cats after Redwall characters when we were very little. Yeah, we had it should be Verdaga and Gingivere, but I said Verduga because I didn't know how to say it right because I was 8. And then Verduga got eaten by a fucking coyote and Gingivere got hit by a car because we lived in New Mexico. Oh, but they were cats, so they were evil. That's the death Brian Jacques would have wanted. The mice were feasting in delight when they learned that the Verdaga Green Eyes had been eaten by a coyote. But coyotes, Redwall is emphatically an old world book. There are no coyotes in that book.
Yeah, there's no coyotes in England. Though there are foxes, but the foxes are never like none of the predators are actually eating any other animals, which I guess like is good because they're all sentient, and it would be kind of fucked up if though I mean again, Captain Snow, the snowy owl, like Basil is like, look, don't fuck with him because he'll eat you. He's an owl. But there is a cat that lives there who does not eat mice. He thinks mice are disgusting, and he only eats fish. So, and there were a couple of good
but
cats.
But they eat fish. They eat fish all the time in these books.
Yeah, the mice eat the fish all the time too, like, and the otters obviously. So like there is a hierarchy of
so
like
fish aren't sentient, they aren't anthropomorphic, they're just food,
right?
But mice,
and it's the only meat that is actually eaten, and really beyond that, they don't mention eating stuff like that anymore either. It's all tubers and roots and berries and nut brown ale and
strawberry cordial
and quiche and apple pies and.
We told the story on that before, that Brian Jacques said that when he was a kid, he was evacuated from the city. I think he was from Liverpool, but he was from the north of England. And he was evacuated with his brothers because of the Blitz. And they were staying in a country house, but it was like during like peak war deprivation years. And he and his brothers found a like pre-World War I Victorian like recipe book of like English fare, basically sort of like, class like cuisine, advanced cuisine, no European food allowed. And only English food.
Yeah,
and,
no Redwall mouse is picking up a Smack Barn Peewet.
Well, no, Smack Barn Peewet is 100% the kind of shit they should be eating. But it's, you know what I mean? But like, what I'm saying is that so he and his brothers, apparently he would tell they would tell stories about like all these feasts and all these recipes they had found in these, imagining what it'd be like to eat these things, because they were subsisting on like the bad rationing food, the like fake butter and hard bread and just
chocolate that has metal shards in it.
You well, not quite that bad, but you would get your family would get like a packet of tea that was your ration for the week or whatever. Like they didn't really they weren't starving to death. They weren't like malnourished, but they were undernourished, and there was so little availability because literally like the Nazis had blockaded Britain, like the U-boats were destroying supply boats. The Hitler was planning on invading. They were bombing the shit and rocketing the shit out of Britain. And so apparently he volunteered at a home for blind children and read stories, and they were such a hit. That's what led to, because I think he was a truck driver.
Yeah, he was. Like, he
a lorry driver, if you will.
Yeah. And that's why they all have different accents, so you can tell them apart.
But also, having been all around the country, you could imagine he had encountered lots and lots of different like regional accents, because there's so many. And when you think about if he was like a grade school aged child in World War II, he would have encountered as a young adult, especially amongst old people, some really like premium vintage accents that just aren't around anymore. Like if you've ever heard Robert Caro, the historian, talk, he's got like a full on born and raised in the borough of Manhattan accent, like almost Bugs Bunny-esque, that like he's like genteel Bugs Bunny voice. That accent's not really around anymore. Like most people who grow up in those sort of like that kind of circumstances just have your sort of default sound like me sort of Midwest like TV news broadcaster accent. So I reckon Brian Jacques definitely, like, his travels around the country probably inspired a lot of that too. Because if you've been to Cornwall and you've been to Wales and you've been to the Northeast and you've been to he's from Merseyside, you've been to Norfolk, like you've heard a lot of really weird regional British accents. Yeah. Certainly you've been to Scotland and you've heard all that.
Who are the Scots in Redwall?
I don't know. I've never heard him do like
Scots.
A recording of him doing the reading. I would, to me, if you had to pick a race of animals to be the Scots, I'd probably say it's going to be the badgers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the big swords fighting constantly. Hate rats, live in a big mountain with a bunch of...
with all their clans of other badgers? Yeah. They're 100% the Scots. Yes, that's it.
They're very solitary too. They're not. But yeah, I mean, I guess there are like
they're friendly with the
sometimes
mice. They get along with them and stuff, but they emphatically want to live in badger world. It's like the badgers are basically like furry animal Klingons.
Right. What is Salamandastron? But the north of the UK. It's cold. It's wet, and you live in a cave somewhere.
Also, there's not a lot of mountains in this country outside of Wales and Scotland.
Oh, okay.
So
well, that
makes
makes sense. Then.
Yeah. So the badger, we have deduced the badgers are Scottish.
If only Brian Jacques was still around to tell us.
I bet you if we went and we listened to a recording of him doing a reading, like I'm not a master of it, but I can tell you who's Cornish and Welsh, and I'm sure there's got to be some Cockneys in there too. I don't know who they would be though, but there's the voles and the moles and the hares and the fox.
We just came across the shrews.
The shrews. There's a pine marten and weasel and polecat. Well, polecat's a skunk, kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
But like, there's you learn so much about furry European woodland creatures.
If you are a furry, this is a perfect book for you. You can find all kinds of things to dress up as in this book.
Think about how many furries there are in the U.S. military, and how every time we pose the question, it's been determined that people who were huge fans of Redwall as kids wound up joining the military.
I always ask, if somebody tells me they're like, yeah, I loved reading Redwall, I'm immediately like, did you ever think about joining the army? And they're usually taken aback by that question, but it's always yes. So if they didn't join, they at least gave it serious consideration at some point.
It's so funny, man. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it. So I think I was about age 12 or so. 12 or 13 was when I stopped really being into Redwall books, but I was really excited. It wasn't that I disliked them so much as I just found interest elsewhere.
They're very samey. About a year and a half ago, I had this notion of I wanted to read all of the Redwall books in the publication. Well, I was going to do it in publication, then I was going to do it in chronological, and then I read 5 books, and I'm like, these books are all the same. They're all a hero's journey in one way or another. It doesn't make them bad, but it is like it's for kids, so it's very samey, but it is very violent too. I was worried that Lily wouldn't be into all of the violence, but she seems to be perfectly fine with it. Like when Methuselah ends up dying, I'm reading this and trying not to let my emotions come through, because I remember reading the first time Methuselah died, and she's just like, okay, I hope Slagar gets killed. I bet he gets killed by that Chicken Hound, who becomes Slagar in Matameo.
Right? Which
I haven't told her that yet, but she's like, well, Chicken Hound runs out. It's like, I hope that snake gets him. And guess what? The snake's gonna get him.
Guess what? Gets him and fucks his face up, and then he has to wear a mask. Yep, that's right.
Exactly. Yeah, we so I'm glad that I get to read that with her. There were some books that I had to, like, my mom was like, oh, here's some of your old books, and she gave me some old Babar books, and I was like, no, we can't. We're not doing Babar.
No, sorry, we're on some Redwall shit. We need some warrior mice. We need feasts.
We need and Babar is very very racist. It's very French colonial. So
oh no, I've never. To be honest with you, I've never encountered that stuff.
Oh, God, yeah. It's all about the elephants being taken out of Africa and being civilized, turned into civilized animals.
See, yeah, that's bad.
So it's not the whole story. Babar is still a kid's book, so it's very kid's book-ish. But yeah, it is the basis of it is, let's take these animals out of Africa and then we put clothes on them and look how civilized they are now. So it's questionable, like the Tintin books. The Tintin books I punched buttons out of them and I sell bits of it as buttons, and then I got rid of the rest of it because I enjoyed Tintin when I was a kid, but it's not a thing that kids should really be reading today.
Yeah,
you can make an adventure. There are adventure comics out there, or graphic novels or whatever, that don't have very, very racist caricatures of Africans in it.
I would say that I don't know. I don't want to stake my reputation on this, but I would say that what's it called? The TV series, I recall being really fun. The books are obviously much older, and the TV series does stuff. I think it modifies the plots to some extent. I don't know if they ever made TV episodes about the most racist Tintin books, but
they made a movie. They made a Tintin movie that was very like it was very Polar Express, where it's like, you know, we hadn't quite hit where we are now with like, let's animate human faces and not make it look insane. But it's not great.
It's also very funny because Tintin is supposed to be 17, but you know, of a indeterminate youthful age with a large forehead and a slightly receding hairline, and he's redheaded and kind of like twink coated. Like, you can imagine when I was in my 20s, the comparison to Tintin that I got was nonstop. I just kind of was like when I saw one of those fucking weird the 3D Tintin movie thing, and like there was some still that people were constantly hitting me with in my mentions because they're just like, this is just you. And they weren't necessarily wrong. It did kind of look like me, or at a certain point in my life.
Did you have that cute little faux hawk going on?
I mean, when I was like 15, but that's different. I mean, because that was like, it was the year 2000, and I also had frosted tips at one point because like taste had died and I was an idiot teenager. God, wait, let's talk about the early 2000s.
Okay, so apparently there are I just did a quick search. So the audiobooks of Redwall are narrated by Brian Jacques plus a full cast. So it sounds like they probably bring in Brian Jacques probably narrates it, and then they bring in people to do the voices. So yeah, we can figure out.
We should definitely listen to a segment of that and do like a color commentary. That'd be a lot of fun. I'll try. I mean, when my daughter gets to the point where she's you know, we're reading books like that. Because I mean, I don't really have a ton of like the world's fondest memories of stuff like this with my parents, but I do remember when I was 5 that my dad decided he would do a thing that he'd read to us every night, and he read us the entirety of over the course of like 2 weeks or however long it was, Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island.
Yeah,
and
that's a good one.
And he did the voices for Captain Hook and stuff like that. You know, wasn't we Captain Hook? What's his
Long
name?
Long John Silver.
Long John Silver. Yeah, thank you. Captain Hook is Peter Pan.
Yeah, I can't.
My dad wasn't freestyling the storytelling. It was Long John Silver. Yeah.
Who also played by Tim Curry in Muppet Treasure Island, which is a very good movie.
Oh wow, yeah. So I mean, I think about this that I want to do that, and I'm looking forward because once we get back and settled in the house, I've had to move a lot of the stuff that we, you know, into just wherever until they're done repairing things. But I do want to do like reading the bilingual books with her and stuff like that, and I'm interested too because like there might be, you know, books that she's going to want me to read to her, you know, that are more of the sort of what are popular children's books for French speakers.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be a whole different cultural thing. And I surely intend on continuing DadChat so I can tell you what kind of like wild shit's going on in fucking French children's books. Who knows?
My kid reads, at this point, she loves comic books. We bought, there's a Marvel Unlimited subscription that you can get where you can read all sorts of Marvel comics.
I've seen this, yeah.
So she's really into that. And I have it too, because I did not grow up reading graphic novels. So she introduced me to Squirrel Girl, which is a fun one.
Yeah, I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, but also like a lot of really great Star Wars graphic novels too. In there, a lot of like Darth Vader, like specific Darth Vader ones with a torturous C-3PO and R2-D2. Like, we still need a protocol droid and R2 unit, but what if they were evil? Wouldn't that be fun? And the answer is yes, it is.
Two things that are very funny about this. So my wife is kind of a Star Wars nerd. Like, I don't know if she has time, but she definitely enjoys Star Wars extended universe stuff.
That's when I got done with Redwall, that's what I got into, was Star Wars novels in my teens. So I'm right there with her.
See, went from Redwall to Japanese RPGs to I was just kind of reading books that I liked, and then subsequently, like, not really a lot of YA stuff. Like, I would read some of the stuff in the sort of teen recommended section at our public library, but I also just started, by the time I was about 15, I just started reading like books intended for adults. I mean, I think I read Stephen King's, I read The Stand when I was not even 13.
Yeah, I think I read The Stand when I was 14 or so.
And I got the unabridged version, so it went on forever. I also read
a lot of Michael Crichton too. I read a lot of Michael Crichton.
Yeah. I read I remember reading Sphere, being kind of confused. I remember reading Congo as well.
Timeline was my favorite because they go back to medieval times.
Oh, right. I remember that one. I liked, it's weird. I like Stephen King stuff more than you might expect because like he is actually a very, very good writer and is extremely good at like, I think the world building and plot stuff, it's riveting. It can be formulaic. He can repeat himself a lot. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's like mega literary in a lot of ways, but it doesn't need to be. Like The Shining, they were just selling it as like a cheap paperback in the PX when I was in airborne school as a cadet. Great book. Fucking great book. I want to say it was Needful Things, something. It was actually really boring, the other one I read when I was like 12. When my parents finally gave up on saying you're not allowed to read Stephen King books because they were like, well, at least he wants to read.
Right.
But I read, I'm trying to think, what is it? 11/22/63 is great. Genuinely. I mean, it's a bit overlong, but like I read that book in like a whole weekend because I couldn't put it down. And this would have been like when I was in my 30s. Like that almost never happens to me now.
Yeah, I read a lot of Michael Crichton, a lot of Star Wars books. There was somebody who on Twitter that said something about how like, you know, there weren't YA books back when like in the 90s and stuff. Like there was a plethora of stuff. I mean, Animorphs was around. Animorphs is I don't know if you ever read it. I didn't read it as a kid, but they are turning them into graphic novels, so I've been reading those. Well, and that is a fucked up series. Like, I mean, that is a war series right there.
If I remember correctly, like the whole thing about Animorphs at the end is that like they're all kind of psychologically destroyed by what they experienced while winning the war, and like that's. I remember there was this snippet that would get shared on Twitter where the author basically said like he didn't want people to see it as like a neat resolution because over the course of what they've had done to them and had to do, like it's changed them for the worse. And he wanted people to come away from that series seeing war as a waste, which feels like weirdly revolutionary compared to like the way that this stuff is normally presented.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the books and being kind of curious, but
I never read them because the like photoshopping on the front of like a person turning into like, I don't know, a salamander or something. It's like, this looks fucking stupid. I don't want anything to do with this. This looks dumb. Not that I was reading anything that was any better at the time.
Yeah, I was reading the incredibly well-written dialogue that was not very well translated of Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger, and then Final Fantasy VII. I mean, Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy VIII. I had a bit of a pattern here. Sierra games, stuff like that. I mean,
Sierra games.
But I would say with Redwall, I think it's weird because looking back on it, 8 through 12 was absolutely like my peak. And I would say weirdly, I feel as though I peaked late in terms of being really, really into it and thinking like this is the best book I've ever read. I read The Bellmaker when I was 11. Mm-hmm. And that one, I was like, this is like for a time, this is like my favorite book. So I was absolutely the target market as a, like late childhood / pre-adolescent boy. I fully was into Redwall. And then, I got into, like I said, I didn't read, I was too old for Harry Potter, didn't really have any interest. And then I read stuff that I hear about, like books that people recommend and stuff, sometimes overreaching for my bracket, you know what I mean? In the sense of like, hey, it's spring break and I don't want to play video games. I'm going to read like The Tin Drum or some shit. And I did not finish it. Stuff like that. But I definitely think that my sort of being fascinated by language, a lot of it started with Redwall and like being interested in both. It got me reading closely because I was interested in what was happening in the details. I wasn't skimming anymore the way that when I was 6 and I tried to read Chronicles of Narnia books, like, God, they're so fucking boring. Mm-hmm. God, especially the extended ones, like not just The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but like when you're into like The Voyage of the Dawn Treader and Prince Caspian, it's just like, man, who fucking cares?
We get it. Christianity, move on.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Sad, ice-chewing ass Ulster Protestant. We got it. Fair. What was I going to say?
Now, something my wife has done though is she has had me print out all of the Newbery book winners, and all of the runner-ups. So, like, if you're ever looking, if you've got a kid of my child's age, 8 or so, or when your daughter is at that age, that's a great list of good books that are for kids and are not just a bunch of schlock. They don't just slap that Newbery onto anything. So that's how, in between all the graphic novels that my daughter's reading, they throw stuff, my wife throws stuff like that in, and they listen to the audiobooks of it. So they'll spend an hour a day listening to she's gonna kill me because she listens to this, and I can't remember what they were just recently reading, but it's that is a great reference point if you're ever like, what books can I get my child to read? But also Redwall, have them just read Redwall. That's fine too.
It was funny that you were talking about this. Two things I wanted to mention. First is that the graphic novel thing I'm pretty interested in, because graphic novels as both not explicitly a thing. I mean, graphic novels as books for grown-ups as well as kids and teenagers is a thing in France, at least has been for a very long time. So there is a very strong tradition of what they call bande dessinée, or BD, basically, is a huge thing in France and in French-speaking countries. So since we are moving to a French-speaking country, like, I think that it'll be interesting, because I'm hoping there'll be stuff that she likes and that we can kind of, read together, and that'll introduce me to some of this stuff too, because some of the canonical, like, French language kids stuff that, or, not quite YA / late childhood into YA sort of themed topical things could be interesting, and then also hopefully avoid the racist shit and find newer stuff that's not racist. But there was a time when I don't know, I liked reading graphic novels. I still do. I just, there's a lot of things that I used to keep up with more, and I don't. Craig Thompson's Blankets was a book a friend of mine got me. I really liked that. That's a graphic novel. It's definitely not for kids, but I thought it was. I mean, it's basically a guy's sort of like fictionalized autobiography of his first real relationship in high school and how it kind of led him out of evangelical Christianity in, like, not rural but like not urban Michigan in the 80s, but also like growing up in a very, very evangelical abusive household, where he was sexually abused by a babysitter and stuff like that, and like his relationship with his brother and his relationship with his parents, and this sort of high school relationship where it kind of like made him kind of realize that the world he had been raised in was really confining and artificial. I genuinely thought it was great. It's not going to be for everyone, but it's one of those things where, like, this is, I don't know, so much of this book, I don't know how you would express this. Like, these sentiments would have to be expressed differently in a written novel. And that's what I think is what makes graphic novels interesting is that, I mean, obviously they're faster reads than regular novels, but there's so much in the detail, and there's so much space to tell a story. I can't remember the author's name, but the graphic novel From Hell that got made into the movie with Johnny Depp, that's, holy fuck, there's so much detail. If you want to get into the spirit of what it was like to live in the East End of London in the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, like, good God, From Hell is mega thorough. So
I've been reading some manga as well, and it's having to have those conversations with my kid of like, no, I'm reading graphic novels that you can't read. Like, I'm reading, I read Chainsaw Man, which is not for children whatsoever. But there are, like, I do want to get her like, well, maybe we can you can read One Piece, or you can read, any of these other things that I kind of come across. And thankfully, my daughter understands, like, look, she's not curious enough at this point to be like, oh, I want to read these subversive things that, my dad reads because, he's telling me I can't read it. It's like, look, it's an incredibly violent graphic novel that you're probably not going to like. She'll be like, all right, fine. Then I won't read it. I got plenty of other shit to read. So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe I was kind of like that too, in the sense that when I got older, I was interested, but when I was her age, that stuff that was sort of like adults only, like, there wasn't anything about it that appealed to me. Like, if someone's like, oh, this is like a movie about grown-ups, like, I remember my parents trying to like hide the sex scene in the movie Ghost by putting the VCR menu on, and like my brother was like, I know what's happening, and like I didn't, and I didn't care. Like, I was just like, whatever. It's just, yeah, it's grown-up stuff. You know what I mean? But stuff that I would connect with really intensely, normally just because, like, the story, the characters. I mean, with the Redwall books, it was always kind of like thinking of yourself as if, what would you do if you were, Matthias, or you were, Madamea, or you were whomever the hero was, the hero on the hero's quest, always male for some reason. I mean, that changed over time, but when Mariel of Redwall, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Mariel. There were a couple of heroines as well.
But what was I going to say was, we were talking about children's books, and it's interesting because, I was thinking about books that have won the Newbery Medal. I was thinking of, what is it, Lois Lowry's The Giver. What is it, Maniac McGee? I can't remember who wrote that. That was a one that was really well received when we were in like end of grade school. Louis Sacker wrote the book Holes that everyone, it's like required reading for primary school kids in America. But Louis Sacker also wrote a series called Wayside School is Falling Down, or like the Sideways Stories from Wayside School. Yeah. And I was actually talking about this with Cynthia today, that like it's not often that something really kind of like makes such a strong impression on you as like a really profound or like beautiful observation in a children's book that you read from like, the cheap paper printed fucking Scholastic Book Fair ordering thing that they used to give us in the 90s, Yeah. But if you remember in Wayside School is Falling Down, their teacher is out because she's like on maternity leave because she has a baby. And they have like the evil substitute who's like psychic and can like read their insecurities and use them to exploit them or whatever. And she's doing like Vulcan mind meld manipulation on the kids. And there's a scene at the end, if I remember, the end of Wayside School is Falling Down, where the teacher, whose name I forget, she comes in to visit the class and so the kids can meet the baby. And the evil substitute is there, and she's trying to do her manipulative shit, and she's mad that it's not working because the kids are so distracted by the baby that she can't like get. If I remember correctly, she can't like exert her nebula or her nefarious will on them, and so she's trying to get into any one of the heads of the kids who's susceptible, so she can convince them to accidentally drop the baby out like the skyscraper window, but she is sloppy in her technique and accidentally reads the baby's mind. But babies don't think in coherent thoughts. Babies just think in like broad brush emotions. And she experiences this unintentional burst of just this incredible feeling of warmth and love and safety that the baby feels being with its mother and with all these kids that are interested in it. And it's such a like overwhelming thing to like the, to the evil doing brain that it like turns her into a good person. And it's like it basically like brain shocks her out of being evil. And I remember thinking like that's such an interesting thing to put in a kid's book. It's just like
there's a lot of real fucked up kids books, like,
but not in a bad way. I don't mean in a bad way. I mean in a good way. Like the idea that like here's the situation that sounds like it's going to be awful. Like she's trying to kill a baby, and instead she realizes that like babies, when all they see is positivity in the world. All they feel is positive and love, when they're cared for. And that's even to the hardest, most cynical, cruel, manipulative piece of shit person. Like reading the baby's mind and getting a burst of that is like so powerful that it basically like reorients them. Mm-hmm. Like that, I don't know, like that's a thing kids can understand that concept. And that's not exactly the world's most, I don't know, it's not like the most like highbrow concept either, is it, for adults? But like that made an impression enough on me that I can recall to you the broad strokes of a plot of a book I read in like the mid 90s. Yeah.
I mean, I know I read all the Wayside books as well, but I don't really remember them. They didn't impress upon me like the Redwall books. Or
No, not at all. I mostly I think I had to read them in school, or like they were around in school. So there were books we could read when we had reading time. Yeah. And I had only read Roald Dahl's insane autobiography for kids so many times. Reading about, wow, Britain fucking sucks. It's awful. Yeah. Man, they really love abusing kids and doing horrible shit to them. Also, why do they call like the junior-most boys in the boarding school fags? That's what they are called. Fagging, like, basically was when I'm sorry to use the word, but it's not meant in the sense of a slur. It was meant in the sense of you were assigned to like a housemaster who was basically like an older boy who just like bullied you and hazed you. Like he made these kids, because they would have been about 10 or 11 and he probably would have been 15 or 16. He made them, like, when he was getting up in the morning, he made them go out and sit in the outhouse to warm the seat up for him, among other things. Like just basically being hazed nonstop. It's like, wow, this explains why Britain is so fucked up.
Yeah.
And then Roald Dahl wrote all these books about how if you're fat, you deserve to die, and then became so anti-Semitic he got kicked out of a private members club in London in the 80s. Which, I mean,
Wow.
can you imagine? He's just, despite the Norwegian name, he's just that British.
Yeah. It's the abuse is just kind of set in somewhere.
Yeah. Well, listen, Francis, we're going to close out, so we need to answer some questions. And specifically, we need to answer Ask a Dad questions, because we are almost at the end of our list. Months and months ago, we asked for people's feedback, and we created a survey thing. And we had a bunch of ones that we liked, and we've all the way gone through them. And except there's a couple more, there's 2 more. And so I'm going to ask one that I think is fun. I don't think we've answered this before. I don't think we've answered this one before because it's not highlighted in green on the sheet, and I'm normally pretty good about that. And the question is, what skill or knowledge do you want to pass on to your offspring / honorary offspring? Because at this point, my daughter hadn't been born yet.
I feel like the thing that it took me a long time to realize, and I feel like it takes everybody a long time to realize it. It's really not until adulthood that you kind of come across the, like, I can just do whatever I want, and if people don't like it, I don't have to care. Like the idea of I need to fit in this box, or I need to act a certain way, or something along those lines. Because my daughter, we homeschool her, so she's always going to be a bit weird because we do that. But she's got ADHD, and she is a strange kid in a lot of ways. And I feel like a lot of that's because she's not around other kids that bully her into a specific way of being or thinking. And that's how I want her to grow up, thinking like, you can do whatever you want, and you don't have to do things to make other people happy. Like, you can do what makes you happy, within moralistic parameters. Don't become a serial killer because it feels good. Don't do that.
Yeah, please don't do that.
Yeah, but when you grow up, realize that, like, if there's something that you want to do, you can do that. And if people tell you shouldn't do that, or it's weird, then those people aren't worth being around. It's not worth having somebody tell you shouldn't read those books, you shouldn't watch that TV show, or you shouldn't study this thing or have this hobby. Just do whatever it is that makes you feel happy with yourself and makes you feel good about yourself, because there's always going to be people who are going to try to drag you down and tell you that what you're doing is bad because they themselves feel bad about themselves. Like I don't want to get too after school special with it, but that's like one of the things that has really been a big portion of my being a contented adult, is understanding that, like, I can do, if it's, I can go to bed at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. I'm tired. It's fine. I can, I'm getting into painting now as an adult. I'm trying new things, and I'm doing new things that, like, in the past, I was like, I'm not good at painting, but I know that, like, you get good at painting as you do it. Or even if you're never good at it, do you enjoy doing it? Are you having fun with it? That's what's most important. So yeah, I would just hope that I could impart that on her, to always be doing what you want to do, not what other people think that you should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with you. And I think the same thing. Like, I think I really want to impart the idea that you shouldn't be afraid to be yourself. You shouldn't be ashamed of who you are, whatever it is that defines you as a person, the things you like, the things you don't like, the way you want to live your life. As long as you're generous and you're kind, you're not mean, you're not manipulative, you're not cruel or unthinking. When I say be a good person, what I mean is that life is challenging, and there's a lot of ways that you'll get away with bad behavior and getting into bad patterns of behavior that it's very rare that life will put a check on you for. I mean, it can happen, but in most cases, people just waste their lives being not good people and not thinking, not empathetic, not caring. You can do that to an extreme, to the point where you kind of make yourself miserable and you run yourself ragged, and I don't recommend it. But I guess it's one of those things where people ask me, I think one of the questions we got asked a while ago was, how would we think if our kids were queer or trans? And both of us said, like, we're like, I don't care, positive. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
In the sense of, like, I'm happy that you know who you are. Mm-hmm. I'm less concerned about your sexuality, your sexual identity or lack thereof, your gender identity or lack thereof. That doesn't really, you're still my child and I still love you. It's more, I want you to be a kind and caring person. I want you to navigate the world in a way where you don't fall into these patterns of behavior that, kind of reward solipsism or self-centeredness or cruelty or stinginess, or just like, reductive dismissals of the experiences of everyone else who lives on this planet with you. And I hope that and that I hope, I don't know, she stays curious about things, because I think about if you had taken a kind of like, like core samples of a tree, if you had taken different snapshots of what I was doing and the direction I was heading in my life at different times in my life, you would have drawn some pretty intensely different conclusions as to what it was that I was going to wind up doing and what my life was going to be like. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily know if I would have, at the time, if you had asked me, I might have been like, no, absolutely, this is what I'm doing. Like, this is what I want to do, even if I was lying to myself. But I've tried to keep an open mind, and I've tried to be honest with myself, and I've tried to work on getting to the point where I don't try to lie to myself and convince myself that something I don't like is something I actually like. And that if something's not working, then I try to address it or fucking leave it behind. And I hope that it doesn't take her as long as it took me to get to the point where I allowed myself to do the things I wanted to do. And I also hope that she keeps more of an open mind about how you get good at something and how you learn something, because I think music is a great example for me personally, but I spent so much time believing I had zero aptitude and zero ability to do anything related to music besides just listen to it a lot, because I thought, well, my experiences with it was that I always felt very amateurish and didn't know anything about it, and I would never get better and I couldn't learn. And then once I actually started working with a teacher who had a teaching style that actually matched what I wanted to do and how I learned, like fucking night and day. And Cynthia told me, she's like, you do realize you're probably not bad at math either. You've just only ever had bad math teachers. So it's that kind of a thing. I hope she keeps an open mind, is open to those kinds of experiences, and knows that, like, you could be heading dead set in one direction at one point in your life, and it might change, and be open to those possibilities, and try to be nice to the people you encounter along the way. That's honestly all I can think of. But But also to not be too after school special. I hope that I can teach her how to, throw up some drywall and change an outlet, do basic around the house stuff. But that's another thing too, dude, is that I was always convinced that I was like, I'm just too insert slur here to fucking, like change a car tire. Like, I've changed car tires plenty of times. I do all sorts of fucking DIY and around the house shit. Well, yeah, you make mistakes as you go, but like if you learn about it in advance, practice a bit, don't rush into stuff, like, you'd be surprised how quickly it comes to you. And at this point, like, no, I'm not a fucking genius at it, and I'm certainly not a carpenter, but you know what? I can put up a shelf pretty goddamn well. And I've seen some bad shelves put up by professionals. My shelving, not perfect, but every time I do it, I try to get a little better. And I hope that same thing with her. I hope that whatever she wants to do, if she wants to learn that stuff, that at least, she will be confident enough that if she buys something off, like, Nightmare Future Amazon, when that's the only economy that we have, and it comes with little mounting things to fucking put, like, hollow wall anchors in to hang like a I don't know, a fucking hanging hook up. She knows how to, get a drill and a screwdriver and install it. That'd be good.
Yep.
But anyway,
she can always call me if she needs that help, I guess. yeah.
Do future teleportation service and be like, Uncle Francis, help me. My dad failed. He was miserable at it. Listen, Francis, great time. Had a wonderful experience reminiscing about Redwall. Yeah. And I was just going to say,
I wanted to talk about it last week, but we got into other stuff.
Sorry. I just talked a lot. I always do that, but good. It's fun.
It's a podcast. That's the point.
Well, yeah, but the problem is it's not a monologue with Francis' reactions. You know what I mean? And I know it can be that way sometimes, so I try to let it flow a little bit better. But God, you know. Also, I haven't talked to you in forever, and there's so much to talk about. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it's been some months, and you've got some like You're at a point now with your daughter where like every month is going to be completely different than the month before. Like it's always going to be constantly changing. So we've got content for years at this point.
Yeah, man. I went and saw her this morning in the hotel before I came up to the studio, and you know I didn't want to leave, but I had to go and get work done, and
yeah.
It sucks. But you know what? Soon enough, we'll be reunited. And I hope this episode sounds good because I'm actually recording it in Apple Logic because once again, in the spirit of continuing to learn shit, I'm like, well, fuck it. We've got it on this new computer. I'm going to learn a new digital audio workstation. So you know what? Stay curious. Try not to be a dickhead. And if you like this episode and you like Hell of a Way, just know that for $5 a month, you can get every bonus episode we have ever done all the way back to January 2017. That is 7 years of content, 7 years of podcasting. Hopefully gradually increasing audio quality over the years. That's all available on Patreon. And at the $10 a month tier, you get a quarterly care package from Francis with flair, swag, patches, pins, etc.
Yeah. And if you join up at any dollar amount, you'll always get our interviews early. I have one that I just posted with the guy who created a application called Hots and Cots, which is like Yelp for the junior enlisted. So if you're getting ready to go to a new base or something, you're like, I wonder what the dining facilities or the living conditions are there. You can rate those things on Hots and Cots. So that's coming out. That'll be free next week though. But like I said, you get those all a week in advance at any dollar level on the Patreon, as well as access to our joint Discord with Lions Led by Donkeys. So good stuff. We got lots of stuff, and I'm always looking for more things. If there's things that you guys think that would be good Patreon goals or things that maybe do lives or something like that. I know you guys have a live show coming up, so I can't do anything like that because I live in St. Louis, and all of you live at least much closer to each other over across the pond. But we can figure something out.
Well, listen, everyone, Francis, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and we'll speak to you next week.